Welcome to my testimony. I wanted to talk about addiction, where I came from, how it got started, how it grew, then eventually freedom. I'm standing on a path purposely because in life we can take a path. A path can lead to somewhere, a path can lead to nowhere. It's your choice. So we did this in 3 parts because nobody likes to hold their attention to a video more than 5 or 10 minutes. So this is part 1. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you learned something.
You said there would be joy in the laying down. You said there would be joy in the letting go. You said there would be joy in the giving of my right. And now I see.
As a child, I have these distinct memories of going into a bar with my mom. We would walk in and she would get me situated in a nice corner booth, and I would have my homework and I would sit there for a few hours while I was doing homework, and she would go over to the bar and get her signature drink, which was beer and tomato juice. I don't know if anyone else drinks that, but she did. And we would be there for hours. And there would be a waitress who would immediately, as I sat down, bring me this incredible drink. And they called them Shirley Temples. They're cherry juice and 7-Up. And I loved it. They would serve it in this really cool, cocktail glass, and it would come with a skewer with a pineapple and a cherry and maybe an orange. And the waitress would always give me extra fruit. So it was very cool. I didn't think anything of that. It would start getting late. I would be there a few hours, and from what I'm understanding, my father would be calling home and we wouldn't be there, so he would call his mom to come and pick me up because they knew that my mom was probably intoxicated and not able to drive me home. And the next thing I would know, my grandmother would walk through the door of the bar. And they had an argument. You're drunk. No, you're not. You're too drunk to drive. No, I'm not. And it was always a battle. And that went on for years. It happened, a few times a week. And that's just how I grew up. But what I didn't realize is I was also becoming addicted to alcohol, if you want to think about it, because I was at the bar, I was in the corner booth, I'm in there to do my homework, the waitress comes over with this great drink. So I'm in this environment that I'm getting very used to. So over the years, my mom had gotten several DUIs, and she had to go to like a weekend lockdown. A few months ago, my husband and I did a meeting together. Why don't you take a listen? But when I was 16, I would grab my girlfriends the minute I dropped mom off, and I'd say, hey, let's go get drunk. But they didn't ever check IDs. So we would go buy Boone's Farm, Pickled Pink, whatever we could get. Plus I was a waitress, and we could buy bottles of alcohol from where we worked. But we would start drinking and we'd all vomit, we'd get sick and have to pull the car over and we'd vomit on the side of the road. Drinking was never glamorous. It was always awful. There was never a time in my life that I didn't get a hangover, that I didn't get sick. Then there were bars, I started going to clubs and I got into that lifestyle. And I'm telling you, the first time I ever walked into a club, I could smell the attraction that I had as a child. The cigarettes, the alcohol, just the atmosphere itself, the staleness. I was lured to that. I say I could see demons dancing. And I know that might sound kind of intense, but I could see the evil. It was an evil place. I saw some really bad things there. I lived that lifestyle for about 10 years. So after 10 years of craziness, I decided that I wanted to get away from that life. I decided that getting married was probably the best alternative. Meet a nice guy, take me away from all this. Well, I'm standing at a cemetery, so as you can see, that didn't turn out well. I married a man, and 2 years later, he was dead. Let me tell you something. My plans were very selfish. It was all about I. There was no God in it. I knew what I needed. I knew what I thought the preference was that God wanted. I totally did it on my own terms. Let me tell you something. If you live life on your own terms, you are sadly mistaken. It will not end well. You try to do something that you think is right and it's not part of God's plan, you are going to end up in worse shape than you were to begin with. That's what happened to me. I ended up going back to the bars, back to the drugs, back to the men. Same mess as before. There's a scripture in the book of Proverbs. It says, as a dog returns to its vomit, so does a man his folly, his stupidity, his utter lack of regard for God. Hate to say it, but that scripture described me at the time. So I'm drinking heavily again, partying. I go to a party. Christmas Eve, it was a work party. My friend and her husband took me, and then I met this guy there. And he was considerably younger than I was. And he's like, well, you want to go down to the bar, the bar down the street? I'm like, sure. So we went to this bar, and we were just acting foolishly. And later that evening, I was headed home. I lived about 50 miles away from where we were. And it was snowing. It was the first snow of the season. And I slid off the road. I mean, not only was I drunk, I slid off the road into the median between like the north and southbound lanes. And I knew I'd been pushing it, okay? I knew that my behavior was out of control. I'd been pushing it, but I wasn't listening to the warning signs. So that night, I was just so broken. I can't describe to you how broken I was. But I fell on my face before God. And I said, God, I can't pick a man for nothing. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I have no joy, I have no hope, and I have no peace. And you've got to give them back to me. And I got up off the floor, and for the first time, I felt peaceful. So I went to bed that night, and I got up the next morning, and I made a decision that I was going to do life differently. It was a season in my life where I had dedicated myself back to God. And I said, God, I am going to allow you to pick a husband for me. But you have to clean me up first. You have got to fix my broken heart. So it was a very difficult period. From going to being with a ridiculous amount of men and then having relationship after relationship fail and then saying, God, I'm done. I'm not dating anybody. I'm not going to be around men. I'm going to be as pure as I could possibly be, and I'm going to dedicate this time to you. And I'm telling you, when I made that commitment, He honored my commitment. It's almost like God started clapping. Okay, girl, you finally said it. You put me first. Because you put me first, I'm going to give you that desire of your heart. And sure enough, I met the man of my dreams. I met God's man. I met my list of the things that I wanted in men. So the rest is history. I've been married for almost 16 years now, and God presented me with someone that was absolutely tailor-made for me. So when people come up to me and I introduce my husband, or I see friends from my past, and they're like, wow, man, you really got lucky. First thing I say is luck had nothing to do with it. I worked, I prayed, I did what I needed to do to become the woman that I needed to be to attract the kind of man that I have. So there you have it, end of part one. Looks like I ride off into the sunset with my Prince Charming by my side. Not so. Part two and part three are going to clearly show you how hell showed up again. So thank you for watching part one. Enjoy part two and part three.